Good afternoon. Everybody have a good lunch, nice and full, ready for a great session. Well, my name is Jeff Burtoft, and I am a principal program manager in the Windows group in Microsoft, and I'm here to talk to you today about progressive web apps. So a little bit about myself. I'm a family man. I have 3 beautiful kids, crazy kids. I also have a beautiful wife who's not in the picture. She says it's because she's always taking the picture, but I think she really just doesn't want to be associated with us on Facebook, so she always has that excuse. But you know, having kids, especially 3 kids, kind of gives me like a master's degree equivalent in dad jokes. So I'm going to try to hold it down today, but I can't make any promises, okay? There's going to be some corny jokes. Progressive web apps. So a year ago, I was here talking to you all about progressive web apps and how it was going to be the next big thing and everyone was going to be excited about it. Well, you know, now it seems like everyone is excited about it. We hear about it all the time. We hear what people are going to do with it. It's an amazing technology that can do so much. Progressive web apps, in the simplest form, being progressive means that they can take advantage of whatever features are available and not fail when they're not available. They're super performant. They're linkable so that you can go from one app to another just like you do web pages. They're responsive. They fit on different size pages without losing the data. They're app-like. They feel like you're using an app. They're connection agnostic. So whether you have a good connection, a bad connection, or no connection at all, the application should work. They're installable. They're always current. They're re-engageable. They're discoverable in different ways, whether it's through an app store or through a search engine. You can connect to users with them like you do with apps, with rating systems. And they're promotable by the platforms that they're running on. And you know what we hear from developers is that that's a crazy amount of stuff. It's almost like having a cat who's a ninja riding on a T-Rex that has claws for hands. So users are telling us sometimes they don't need all of that. They just have a web page. Well, your application, whether you're trying to build a progressive web app or you just want to improve the web as it is today, it's okay, because PWAs are a group of technologies that we can all benefit from, whether you're using them all together or one of them. Now, first of all, progressive web apps are not a tick box in your development cycle. They're just not something that you should add into every project without thinking. They're not the end of native development. There's still plenty of reason to be out there and developing native, especially when I'm in a room full of C# developers. It's not that every piece of web content needs to be a PWA. You may have a great application that's running on the web that will make a fantastic PWA, but if you have a site that handles an RSS feed, those don't all need to be applications. And they're not native apps ported to the web. We've tried that in the past, and that's not the solution that we're looking for here. But what a progressive web app is it's a development approach that uses a set of technologies like the ones that I showed you on the slide to create an experience for users that are like applications. Progressive web apps are progressive. So the experience of the application should take advantage of the capabilities that are on your platform. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit, about how a progressive web app can run on any platform, whether it supports progressive web apps or not. Progressive web apps should also be an opportunity to reconsider what we call a web app. There's been many times when I feel like web applications have taken the worst parts of the web and the worst parts of apps and put them together. This is an opportunity for us to step back and take a look at that and make sure that we do our apps right. Now for this session, we're going to talk about apps. So there's plenty of times that you'll be able to use these technologies on the web, but let's think about it through the scope of an application. In other words, let's think about it as an interface to do things with. Now, the web of old has never been fun. And I'd like to say that this screenshot was from a really long time ago, but this is a travel system for some unknown company that might start with micro and end with soft. That our employees would go and they'd put in their travel, and what it was is, first of all, it was a big, heavy page with like 4 or 5 different versions of jQuery on it. It was made for a really big screen. It has tons of functionality, but you never know really where to start. And so they did a redesign of that, and they made it look better. So that's good. Taking an old web page and making it look better, improving the interface a little bit is helpful. But it still wasn't an adaptive page. It still was horrible to use on top of a mobile device. And it did absolutely nothing when you weren't connected to the internet. The web on its own lacks context. So a web page generally doesn't know who I am until after I put in a username and a really hard password. You know, nowadays it seems like it's getting harder and harder to come up with a password that meets the requirements for a site. They want to make it safer and safer, but I swear I had a website the other day that asked me for at least 3 emojis in my password. Well, you guys are a hard crowd. That was a funny one, wasn't it? So it lacks context. It doesn't know who we are. We doesn't know what that we want to do, and it doesn't know how we want to pay for it. Well, lucky for us, in the darkness, we got a ray of light that we call applications. You get it? Her name is Ray, lightsaber. Are you guys all Star Trek fans? They have Star Wars here, right? So applications changed the game a little bit for us. So applications were connected to the devices that they ran on. The interfaces tended to be much simpler, more driven towards a task. And it allows me to use the features that the device offers, whether it's connection to my wallet or to my contacts or to my hardware. Native apps can do that. And in the mobile space, we've seen some really exciting things. But I'll tell you that there are pain points in the native application space as well. So going from my travel website into the travel app from the App Store, I found that the travel app was, for some reason, 74 megs of download to get the same thing I was getting from a single load of a web page. And having to have that updated through a store process, although it's great that the stores do it on their own, it can put you with users on different versions of your application all at the same time. So progressive web apps have an opportunity to kind of take the best of both worlds and put them together. So let's take a look at what that might look like. So this is another expense app built for a mobile phone. You can see that the same type of functionality. You can look through the different expenses that you have. You can recategorize them. You can look at the receipts or add and upload receipts. And this same application also works on a desktop or tablet device. This time using the entire screen real estate so that you can see all your data at once. Whenever you dig into a transaction, it isolates it on the screen. It even gives you access to the files local on your hard drive. And as you might have guessed, this wasn't a native application. This is a web application. Now we see positives and negatives from both of these type of applications. First of all, let's look at the web. So links make it really easy for us to distribute web apps. We can add a link on a page. We can go from one app into another app by simply following a link. The updates are simple. All we do is make a change to a file or a number of files, push it to our website, and then the users get the new version of our application the next time they come. We have flexible layouts on the web. So we have vertical width, vertical height measurements that make it very easy for us to build layouts that work on all different screen sizes. In fact, I often tell my friends who use XAML that if they want to know what XAML is going to look like in 6 years, they can look at what CSS in the web looks like today. So web apps have small footprints. They load on demand. They are reusable. Code and frameworks can be used from one page to another, from one map to another. However, native apps have a lot of benefits as well. First of all, a native app is offline by nature. So you're downloading the entire application up front so that it should work immediately once you load it up. You have full access to the hardware in a native application. It's a high trust environment. On most platforms, that application has gone through some sort of review, whether it be a manual review or an automated review, to make sure that you get a trusted application. It's easy to do payments on mobile devices. The mobile device knows who you are. They already have payment items recorded that can easily be used inside of applications. Now, both of these have negatives as well. On the web, as I mentioned, verification and authentication is still hard to do. Without having access to your device and without knowing what that your profile is, we have to go through rigorous steps of login to get the application to know who we are. In fact, tomorrow at noon, I'll be back here talking about Windows Hello and biometric authentication in the app and the web space. So if you want to know more about that, I encourage you to come back then. There's patchy access to hardware on the web. It's really difficult. There's some upcoming specs around Bluetooth and location APIs, but we're very limited in what we have access to. It's really easy to spoof applications on the web. Trust is a hard thing for us as web developers. And payments are very difficult as well. On the native side, there's a huge data footprint. When you have to update an application, in many cases, you have to update the entire application package instead of updating a single file like we can do on the web. There's slow update cycles. You may have to wait for that review before your new update can hit the store, and then wait for the users to trigger those updates on their device. There's not a lot of reuse in native development. Maybe at the lowest levels you have some reuse, or if you're very strategic with something like Xamarin, you're able to reuse code from application to application. But in many cases, developers are writing different apps for different platforms. So how are PWAs going to bridge the difference between these two spaces? Well, first of all, a progressive web app has to be based on a secure connection. There has to be a secure environment. So that means it needs to either be running on HTTPS or HTTP2, so that the user knows when they're inside of a progressive web app, it's an environment that they can trust. A progressive web app needs to have an app manifest. Okay, that's the second component of a progressive web app. The app manifest will give the platform information about your app. So this is going to be simple things such as the name of the application, the list of icons that it will use whenever it's pinned to a start menu or to a home screen, how you want it to display and what orientation, some background colors or theme colors that you want to use in your application, and then even the scope and the start page of that app. This manifest file is just like any other web content. It's a JSON file that you put on your web server, just like you would an image or a CSS file. And like a CSS file, you add it to the top of your page in a link tag. And then search engines and stores know how to ingest your progressive web app and display it properly to a user. So in the Windows space, when we have applications, we want to make sure that those are discoverable whether you're in the store or you're searching for it on the web. The same thing with progressive web apps. A progressive web app should be able to be discovered through a search engine if a user is in a browser, or through the store if they're in the store catalog looking for apps. Now from that manifest file, we can build out a store page. We have the name that we pull from the manifest, the description that's included in the manifest. You can have icons and screenshots listed there that will give us content to provide to the user, that if they're discovering it through an app store, they have an idea of what your application has to offer them. And the great thing is from a user perspective, a progressive web app is an app. So we want to display it the same way that we do any other app in the App Store. Now the last big part of a progressive web app is what we call a service worker. Now a service worker is a new technology that we have on the web today. It's actually in Windows RS3, our fall creators update. It's behind a flag. Later on this year, and starting with our insider builds, we'll be releasing it without a flag. But what the service worker does is it acts as a proxy in between your web app and the server. Now, as a proxy, it can have rules that help it cache files based on how you want your app to function. So it can know when it should cache the files, when it should pull the files from its cache, or when it should always go back to the web server to get files. Service workers can also refresh your application in the background while your user is using the app. It can also handle other background tasks like notifications. It can even handle push notifications when your app is closed. So it gives you that native-like offline and background functionality that we haven't had in the web thus far. Now for Windows, when we think about progressive web apps, we look at the landscape that we have for users today. And we see that users are accustomed on Windows to using web apps and using web pages. And they're also accustomed to going to the store and downloading applications. So whenever we looked at progressive web apps, we didn't want to create a new category of application, hoping that the user would be able to figure out what we mean whenever we say progressive web app. So progressive web apps on Windows 10 are built on top of our hosted web app platform, which makes them full UWP applications. That means that a progressive web app can run across any of our devices, including the Xbox. In fact, we have a number of applications that you may use on your Xbox today that are already running as web apps. To a user, they're just applications. We recently announced that Microsoft Teams will be coming to the Windows 10 store. What many users don't realize is that Microsoft Teams will be coming to the store as a progressive web app. When we looked at all of the different applications that we use, we wanted to make sure that as we build the different technologies like we have in progressive web apps, that we ourselves are actually using them. So Microsoft Teams is going to be the first progressive web app that Windows releases to the store. Now on Windows, one of the differentiators that we have for progressive web apps is that we're leading the way with API access within the applications. I mentioned earlier that progressive web apps are UWP applications. And with that, they have benefits that all UWP apps have. That means that they get unlimited storage. When you're on the web, you often have storage caps for different types of data. We're able to remove those caps for progressive web apps. We're able to give you API access to all of the what we call WinRT or Windows API sets. That goes from everything from a live tile to a rich notification, Cortana access, and even some of our new APIs like Inking or MyPeople. It gives you the ability to integrate your progressive web app into the platform in ways that you've only been able to do with native apps in the past. Now, when you're building a progressive web app, you actually can use that strategy to support all of your platforms. Now, natively, progressive web apps are supported on Android through Chrome. So what happens on Android is that a progressive web app is installed in what they originally called a web APK, which basically is an APK that's created that just shows your progressive web app in its own container, much like what we do on Windows. The install is done through the browser. On Windows 10, we're going the store route, and we're making the installs for progressive web apps happen primarily through the store. Now, we also see a number of polyfills out there, and I'll talk about tooling in a minute, that allow you to put your progressive web app inside of the Play Store or the iOS App Store as well. But the thing to not forget is that a progressive web app, to truly be progressive in nature, has to work on platforms even if they don't have the latest and greatest technologies. If you're building a progressive web app that requires a service worker to function, then it's not a progressive web app. It's just a web app that's taking advantage of some of the new technology that's out there. A progressive web app should always be backwards compatible. So that means that your progressive web app can be ran on any platform in the browser. Whether you're using Firefox or Opera or an older version of Internet Explorer, they should be able to run your progressive web app through the browser. Now, tooling and resources, there's actually a lot of them out there for us today, and I want to go through a couple of them. One of my favorites is the Service Worker Cookbook, and this is a site that Mozilla puts out that basically has demonstrations of a number of different functionalities that you can do with service workers. So it shows you some easy things like caching an offline page, to some much more difficult things like handling notifications while the browser window is closed. Google has a great tool called Workbox, which will allow you to create very advanced scenarios with service workers to be able to handle different caching strategies for different types of files and being able to do background updates and those type of things. Very powerful tool from Google. My favorite, because it's one of the tools that I work on, is PWA Builder. PWA Builder will help you through each of these stages of your progressive web app. Starting with your manifests, you put in your URL, it'll build out a manifest for you, allow you to choose some service worker functionality options that you want to include, and then even give you binaries to run on platforms that don't support PWAs natively. There's also really great documentation that walks you through what each of these materials are, why you might want them on your site or in your progressive web app, and how to get the most out of them. One of the newest ones we have out there is called Google Lighthouse. So this is a plugin for the Chrome Dev Tools that will do an analysis of your progressive web app or your website and tell you where you have opportunities to improve the performance or the experience or the overall quality of your application to be a progressive web app or to just be a better web page. Okay, Now I want to show you how easy it is to create a progressive web app and run it. Now normally what I do is I take one of our Microsoft properties out there and convert it into an app and show people how great it is. But I thought I'd do something a little bit different. And instead of choosing a Microsoft property, I'm going to choose a Google property. So this app is Inbox by Gmail. Anyone here use Inbox? All right, if you're a Gmail user, then it's a alternative interface to your mail applications that allows you to view the mail through kind of a lighter interface. And then I'm going to use PWA Builder to build the application and run it locally. So I'm going to grab the URL here, and this is what we're going to use as the base. And what PWA Builder is going to do is it's going to first go out to the website, do some quick analysis, and try to figure out as much of the data for your manifest as it can. So, for example, it picked up kind of a long name. So I'm going to just turn it back to Inbox by Gmail. Found a description. Found a few icons. I just happen to have a Inbox icon on my desktop here, so we will upload a bigger one. And what PWA Builder will do is it'll actually go out and resize the image to meet all of the different specifications for the different platforms. It'll give them all to you there. And if I had control over the site, I could add service workers and that type of functionality, but I'm not going to actually skip over to the publish part. You can download the content, attach it to your website so that it's working for the web on Windows. You can generate the AppX that you submit directly to the store. You can do a one-step publish that will publish it into a PWA Builder account and then transfer it over to you when you're ready. In this case, I'm just going to be downloading the content. Come on, internet connection. This is always risky when you're doing Wi-Fi. All right, so while that's building, I have a copy already downloaded. And so what you'll see here is it gives you a copy of the service workers that you select, the packages. In this case, it was just Windows 10. It gives me the manifest that it generated for us. And then it also gives me a PowerShell script that I can go ahead and run. And this is going to install it on my Windows 10 machine. And so I'll see it there, Inbox by Gmail. We can then, I have it pinned already here to my desktop. But you'll see it's a normal application. It sits in your application list just like any other Windows app does. And then when I launch it, I get the Inbox experience through an application. Now, remember, this is the progressive web app. It's in its own container, so it has some of those benefits like the API access that I mentioned earlier, but it works just like it does for the web. So whenever we sign in, this is always another risky thing, showing your email during a demo, because you just never know. So this is just the warning, okay? I'm not a bad person no matter what you see here. So you get that same app experience, and it works great on different screen sizes. Can dig into those apps, and you get this fantastic app experience that you would normally get through the browser. Now you get that through the progressive web app. Now, it's finally ready. When you're done, when a user is done with the progressive web app, just as they install it like they do any other app, they can also uninstall it just like any other app. So a simple uninstall, and it's gone. So it's very easy for a user to try out an application and prioritize those applications just like those progressive web apps, just like they do any application. All right. So progressive web apps are exciting. There's a lot of new technology that's involved here. There's also a lot of patterns that it's trying to reinforce on the web. So this is a really great opportunity for us to make a shift in the way that we're developing our websites and our web apps. PWAs give a user an opportunity to do a try before you buy scenario. So in this case, they can visit a site like Inbox and then decide that they want to use it on a regular basis and go ahead and install it, and then have access to all that great functionality. PWAs allows a user to do what they came for. So your progressive web app you should be thinking of it like you are an application scope, where you want to make it simple for the user to come and do what it is that they want to do. Progressive web apps are cross-platform. And it's important that whenever you're writing a progressive web app that you're thinking about responsive design. Don't write an application that only works on a mobile device. Don't write an application that only works on a desktop device. Your progressive web app should work on whatever device the user wants to use. And because it's cross-platform, you're not tying your user into a particular platform. If they are using an iPhone one day and then they want to move to an Android device, they shouldn't have to worry about losing your application, because your app is going to be on all those platforms. You should ask a user to go into a particular scenario to use your application. Don't make it just a mobile app. Don't make it something that's limited to a certain device type or a certain flow. Make your applications simple and easy for the user to go through the flow as they desire. Progressive web apps should be an opportunity for us to simplify the products that we have on there on the web. Take those old websites that are bloated and overloaded with features and trim them down, maybe even build them into multiple applications, and rethink the approach that we're taking to the web. And I think that users will respond well to that. PWAs should fix the worst problems that we have on the web and inherit only the good parts that come from a native application. Now we go back and we look at that list from a web, but we shouldn't lose some of the really great things that we have as a web app. So the distribution model that we get, being able to link from one application to another and follow a link over into an app. Flexible layouts and those type of features that we've grown to use inside the web should continue to be a part of what we're doing when we're building progressive web apps. But this is an opportunity for us to take from the native column all of the good parts that it has to offer. We're now using cutting-edge technologies that allow us to work in new metaphors. So we're not just thinking about what's happening while the user is online. We can now think about what they're going to be doing when they're offline, or what they're going to be doing whenever the application is closed and how we want to re-engage them. Our progressive web apps can have that same high trust model. If a user is going through an app store to get your application, they're going to be expecting that your application has been vetted by the store, that it's going to be trustable, that it's going to be secure. You want to make sure that you're using HTTPS or HTTP2 to deliver your applications. Whenever possible, use the APIs on the platform for things that are hard, like authentication or connecting with contacts or payments. When those APIs are available to you, you should use them to make life simpler for the user. Now I want to leave you with one last example here. These are two different versions of the Twitter application. One of them is the native version. One of them is the progressive web app version. And what you'll see as we go through here, you'll notice, first of all, the feature sets that Twitter has on both those apps are identical. So there aren't any features that are missing when you go through the PWA. Their animations and their user patterns that they have inside of their applications are the same between the two. There wasn't anything that they are or are not able to do inside of one space that they can't do in the other. Probably the biggest difference between these two is the size of the files that need to be downloaded. So you'll see the one on the right is actually the progressive web app. It's called Twitter Lite. It is a version of their application that runs on the web with a service worker, does background tasks, is able to do notifications. The one on their left is their Android application that they continue to support through the store. This is a great way to do a progressive web app. This is what I'm hoping to see from you as you take the step towards building progressive web apps. So I challenge you to take this information and apply it to the applications that you're building. So go out to PWA Builder and give it a try. Have it build your manifest for you, put that on your site, and then let me know about it, because I'm really curious to see what you all are able to do with some of these great technologies that we have today. So that's all I have. Thank you very much.